Welcome to the conversation where engaged and informed minds will meet. And we're here to just simply have a conversation. I want everyone to relax, lay back, and definitely enjoy the conversations that we're going to have. I'm Dr. Yvette Bartee, and I'm your lead facilitator for this evening. My co-facilitator, Ms. Alicia Lewis, was unable to make it tonight. So I'm going to be rowing this boat all by myself, but I have two dynamic speakers, guest panelists with us on this evening who are going to bring some very great knowledge concerning the topic that we're going to address. And we're focusing on the state, meaning the condition of Mississippi, really rallying individuals to get out and vote, be intentional about the vote. I have with me first Dr. Johnny Dupree. He entered public service in 1987. In 1991, he became the first elected African-American mayor of the Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Thereafter, he became the Democratic nominee for governor of Mississippi, and then he was the Democratic nominee for the Secretary of State for the state of Mississippi. Dr. Dupree is a graduate of Jones Junior College, the University of Southern Mississippi, and Jackson State University.
I love. I love.
Yes, I love. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. He's an entrepreneur owning several businesses in the state of Mississippi. And last but not least, he's definitely an active member of his church, a proud father, husband, and grandfather. And I present to you Dr. Johnny Dupree. Also, in addition to Dr. Dupree, we have Mr. Zack Wallace. Mr. Zack Wallace began his public service career in 1997 as the deputy clerk in Hinds County. And then thereafter, he became the chief deputy clerk for the circuit clerk's office there in Hinds County, Jackson, Mississippi. From there, he then was elected, yes, Mr. Wallace, he was elected as the first Black circuit clerk of Hinds County, Jackson, Mississippi. Mr. Wallace is a graduate of Millsap College. He's an active member of his church, and he too is a father and a proud husband. Welcome, both of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So listen, we want everyone who is watching to get engaged. I want you if you have any questions, please post your questions. If you have any concerns, we want constructive feedback because the ultimate goal is to engage a meeting of the minds of diverse individuals who are seeking change for the betterment of fellow Mississippians as well as Americans. So tonight, we're going to start with Dr. Dupree. Dr. Dupree, when we look at the systemic and pathological injustices of this country, as well as this state, you too was a political candidate as well as I. And oftentimes I heard on the campaign trail that things would never change. Things are going to remain the same. My vote does not matter. My vote does not count. So how do we speak to those individuals and encourage them that their voice is in their vote, or that their vote matters? And if they refuse to vote, then definitely things will remain the same. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, look, Dr. Bartee and Mr. Wallace, thank you. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be on with you both tonight. Really, you're doing a yeoman job in trying to put the word out how important it is to vote. I will also tell you, I've gotten some texts from some people that I told about the meeting tonight, that you have not allowed them to they have the Zoom address, and you have to let them in. I don't know what they're talking about because you are the technology folk. But they're saying that they can't get in. So
right. The only individuals for the Zoom would be, it was going to be the four of us, myself and the co-facilitator and the two guests, and everyone else would have to watch it from their Facebook page. And what they can do is—
from their Facebook page.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what that is so I can pass it on?
Actually, do you have it on your website, on your Facebook page? Or if not, they can go to Dr. Yvette, Yvette, and then my last name, Bartee, and they should be able to pull it up.
Okay, well, hopefully they'll be able to get that. Okay. I got one young lady in here who's passing it on. So let me tell you, the significance of both voting. You know, for African Americans, for people of color, that is something that we've been talking about for gosh, awful too long. I had a discussion about this the other day, and I went back to 1963, in June of 1963, which is a very significant time. That was when President John F. Kennedy talked to the nation about what was going on in Alabama. They already had the thing in Ole Miss about trying to allow African Americans in. And he said at that time, when George Wallace was standing at the doors of Alabama, University of Alabama, he said, and I'll read to you, said, "A great change is at hand." And when we look at today, a great change is at hand. You can see it all across America. He said, "A great change is at hand." And it was our task, it's our obligation to make that revolution, to make that change. We need to make it peaceful and constructive for all people. But he went on to say, those who do nothing are inviting shame as well as violence. Those who act boldly are recognizing what's right and where we are today. And so what I've seen young people recognizing where we are today, recognizing what's right. That's why the flags coming down. That's why the monuments are coming down. It's because those people who are in authority, those elected officials, or those who are appointed by the elected officials, are seeing the handwriting on the wall. They're seeing that people of color matter. They're seeing that that we make a difference. But the people of color are now seeing what kind of power we've gotten. That's the significance of it. And as we get into, I guess, our discussion, we can talk more about the significance of it. But it's very important that what we try to do is convey to those who are out there not voting. And I'm not talking about young people. I'm talking about older people, young at heart people, young people, anybody over 18. I'm saying that there are so many people. The last election, there was 1 million people didn't vote in Mississippi. That is obnoxious.
Yes.
1 million people. We could have changed we could, our hospitals wouldn't be closing because we would have health care, because we'd have Medicaid. And those 300 to 600,000 people who don't have it would have it right now. Those are the kind of things that I'm talking about, that if we vote for the right people, then those kind of things that happen with us or for us. But when we don't vote, then it happens to us. So thank you very much.
Now you brought up some very valid points that when we look at the numbers of people who did not vote yet were registered to vote, that's the group that I'm talking about. And I think throughout the years, part of their frustration and aggravation, at least what was conveyed to me on the campaign trail and just talking with, family members, is that there's so much continuation of systemic racism, injustices when we look at the educational system, when we look at, like you mentioned, healthcare reform or the lack thereof, when we look at criminal justice reform. Oftentimes these disparities and disenfranchisements affect people of color, Black and brown people, as well as the poor whites. And so for years, you are the more so of the history buff with this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from the conception of this country, and even when you look at the Mississippi Constitution, a lot of the dialogue or a lot of the information then was to prevent people of color from rising or elevating or becoming empowered. And a lot of that is still on the books. But if we can get those individuals to understand that we will not move forward unless you get out and vote. And you made another key point about the people that we elect in these offices. It would behoove us to make sure that we are knowledgeable about what their true concerns are, because when we send them at the local and state level, they represent us. And if we don't know what it is that they value, then we send someone there who vote on laws or create laws that does not benefit his or her constituents as a whole. So a lot of what it is misinformation. Oftentimes information is kept away. Sometimes people don't seek the information. So how do we get them to understand, even though we may be weary, even though we may be tired, and we're still dealing with some of the systemic misfortunes of since the Voter Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement, we are still dealing with some of those things that plague them even more today. So how do we let those individuals, perhaps maybe the baby boomer generation, or even my generation, know that it is still vitally important that we get we're not only informed, rather, but we get engaged in the process?
But Dr. Bartee, I'm going to try not to hog this conversation. I'm going to let Zack answer something.
Go ahead, Doctor. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But I'm getting my thoughts, Zack, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay.
You know, one of the things we have as a people, and I don't know if it's because we don't teach it in school or because we don't teach it at home, but we don't know our history. And if you don't know your history, one thing about other cultures, one thing that they make sure that their young people know is that is their history, so they don't repeat the history, so they can make sure that they can change history by knowing what happened in the past. You were right, 400 plus years ago, we came over here, and if you look at the Constitution, and we just had an imperative Congress and set up the presidency. But Article 1, Section 2 talked about who had the right to vote. Well, you couldn't have a right to vote unless you were an adult. Well, African Americans, first of all, weren't adults. They were 3/5 of an adult,
right.
3/5 of a human being, and didn't own any land, and all those kind of criteria they put forth. Then we had all things that you just talked about, 64, 65, Voters' Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, all those things that made us whole and gave us a right to vote. And then in Mississippi, they said, oh yeah, we're gonna start a sovereignty commission. The sovereignty commission came, and it was just to do just what the Constitution set out to do, not to give us citizenship, us the right to vote. That's not what they wanted us to do. You know, Martin Luther King wrote his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? When he wrote his last book back in 1967, 68, he talked about where we are, where we were then. We were #1 in poverty. We were #1 in obesity, #1 in childhood mortality. We were #1 in all the bad things. We were number 50 in all the good things. He said that for all the good things that white folk have, we have half that. For all the bad things that white folk have, we have double that. That's when they said when the whites cough, we catch pneumonia.
Yes.
Those are kinds of things, the historical things that happened to us. You know, in 2015, and I understand taking the flag down. In 2015, I took all the flags down in the city of Hattiesburg, that the city of Hattiesburg owned, all the buildings and down. And then hopefully started trying to work on other things that we needed to work on. We started trying to work, but that's what we really need to be on, is those things that really change our lives. And now it's the time to do that. There is a propensity out there now to come out with elected officials to change. And now we got about changing the lives of people of color and people of the United States.
Mm-hmm. And I agree. I think now that there is a momentum, I think that there is a shifting or a paradigm shift that we as people of color and the least of these that society consider can take advantage of that. It's a changing of the guards. And I could be wrong. I could very well be wrong. But I sense that it is. And I believe that part of what you mentioned when we talked about the Constitution and those things that are still prevalent since 64 and 65, perhaps have forums where people understand these particular items or these particular bills or laws are still on the books. I was talking with someone today, and that was a conversation that we had. And I said to this individual, well, I didn't think about it in that manner, but you are right. These things are still prevalent. And so it is important that we are informed. Therefore, if we're informed, we become engaged. Point two, when we talk about the political candidates, I think that it would do us good to begin to vet and groom individuals who speak to the very nature and essence of those issues and concerns that that plague us as a community or that would help us. And then in the process, when it's time for these elections to come, we will have already had a sense of who we are putting, before to represent us or to run for an election. And I think that would be most beneficial if we practice some of those things within our community. Okay.
And just to piggyback on what you just said, I think the key thing is being informed. We can start today. It's never too late to be informed. Like we go back and talk about the history. I can sit out in my church and talk to some older members there that tell me how they grew up, their life history. And I want to do better than them. Now, it's my job to tell my children, my boys, I want you all to do better than myself.
That's right.
So as the official, I'm not doing it just for me. I'm doing it for the future, and I'm doing it for the past generation that fought and died for us. I think that's the big thing, being informed. Every little chance I get, I try to tell people exactly what does the circuit clerk does. What are my responsibilities? And maybe sometime talk to them or so, come downtown. Let me show you some books. Let me show you the black and white books for marriage license. Let me show you all these green file folders, all these arrests, and most of them are blacks. It's time to make a change.
It is.
We talk about change. We had to start with ourselves and start today by making that change. And that's what being informed.
Right. And so in the world of education, it says, I believe it's reach one, teach one, or teach one, reach one. Yes. And so for those of us who have advanced in our area of expertise, our professional careers, yes, we should reach back and help. And here again, there are a lot of young people who are interested in the political process. And I think that if we have a, what's the word I'm looking for? A collaboration from the older generation and the younger generation, and really sit and listen to the concerns, I think we could really make a change. Now, Mr. Wallace, since we've talked about the history, voting has been an issue for people of color since conception of this country, as well as within the state of Mississippi. Let's talk about some of those things that people need to be.
Oh, the question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about some of those issues or things that people need to be informed about. Just as all elections are important, I believe that this election coming up is one of the most contentious, or will be the most contentious election in my lifetime that I've ever experienced. And there's been a lot of changes, especially since the pandemic. So what I want you to do is talk about some of the dates that we as fellow Mississippians need to know about, as well as I want you to talk about the 22 disenfranchisement crimes if I'm not mistaken, just recently I read an article where the rapper Snoop Dogg, I believe just this year, actually voted for the first time because he felt that he didn't have the right to vote. So there are a lot of people out there with criminal backgrounds who still have the right to vote, but they don't know that they do. So talk to us a little bit about that and anything else you would like to add to the conversation.
Yes, definitely. First of all, we have over 160,000 registered voters, and not even half of that come out to the election to vote. So every election is very important. A lot of times people will say, hey, I don't like the poll workers. The line's too long. I just don't feel like doing it. But it's time to no excuses. You can actually tell them, like I said, go a step further. If they don't want to go and stand in line on election day, talk to them about absentee voting. Bring up conversation about voting while we're watching football, while we're watching basketball. We're not doing this time, but while we just hanging out sometimes.
Okay.
Those kind of conversations come up because a lot of times we start talking about money, and that'd be a good topic to bring up. What can we do to make the county better? What can we do to make the state better? So I have friends in the area I grew up in. Some of them might have some arrests. I get a chance to go back over there and talk to them. They know exactly what I do. And with me being there, this gives me a chance to motivate them to come out and vote and maybe just do better. Be a better father, be a better husband. But if I'm not doing it, they won't do it either.
Right.
So I think all of us have people that are watching us. Sometimes I look at my children and ask them why they like the same type of music I like. Why they do the same things that I do. They just pick it up.
Right.
And I hope I pick up all my good habits. But back to our history, the crimes. As being a circuit clerk, I always say we can go a step further. When I find out people is not voting, I ask them why. I have a little crime. Well, call me tomorrow morning. I go a little further and tell them to call me on my cell phone. Make them feel a little bit comfortable. If we make people feel comfortable about their situation, we can help them a little bit better. So as the circuit clerk, we can help out with expungement. We can talk to the attorneys to get them right on the right path. And at the same time, make sure they are registered to vote. Because I tell people now, don't just plan on just being a registered voter. Be an active voter. If you're gonna get your driver's license, make sure you're gonna go buy a car and drive. So that's the main thing. Just don't just say that you actually just a registered voter and show your ID card. I tell people, let's go a step further and be an active voter. Don't just go to the precinct and say, I just voted for this person just because he's black. But if you vote for that reason, make sure that you hold me accountable for what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's representing you, not only myself and my family.
So I heard several points in there. You talked about a moral obligation or a strong value system where you're putting forth and setting a proper example for your family. So in essence, should the education or the inquiry to be informed or the inquiry to be informed about the political process and those things that affect us as a community, as a whole, are you saying that it starts in the home?
Yes, it starts in the home.
Okay.
I will tell you this. I met Mr. Dupree once before, and it was such a good vibe. I think we had changed his number then. I think that time we was at Wendy's, the restaurant, the fast food place.
We did.
It was a good vibe there.
We did.
Started right there, and just showing. He just showed me some love, and just how he act towards me. It starts at home. It starts in our character. It speaks a lot for ourselves. And I just didn't wake up in the morning and say I just want to be an elected official. I saw how others carry themselves and how much they cared about the community. Make me want to do things. So, like I said, yes, it definitely started at home and started with our everyday conversations.
Okay. Mr.
Dr. Bartee, could I expand on that for just a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, look, and I agree with Zack. I mean, when we grew up, not you, me, because you're a lot younger than I am.
Mhm.
You know, our home was not just the four walls that we went to sleep in. Our home was our community. Geographically, it was our community.
Mhm.
You hear the story about if you did that, and then you could, that was because it was a community, and everybody took stock and took ownership in the people and the kids in that community. Well, now geographically, some of us don't live in those communities anymore. We live outside of our communities. But what we've done, we've left the people, a lot of the people who are in those communities who are marginalized, who live in poverty, who don't have the educational background that we would hope that they would have, don't have the opportunities that we hope they would have. Then they're essential workers, and that's why they can't take off like everybody else and work from home. So those people now become our families. They become our homes. So it becomes our responsibility then to teach those people that you can have an expungement. One expungement, the state of Mississippi said you can have one expungement. You can also, if you got it one expungement, then you can go vote and not have to worry about can I vote or can I vote. It's getting the information out so that everybody knows that it is your right. It is your right to vote. It's not a privilege. It's your right to vote. We've jumped all the other hurdles that we had to jump. It is our right to vote like everybody else.
Right. So what does that process look like? I agree wholeheartedly with both of you when you say it's a community effort. And you have the marginalized group who are struggling just to survive from day to day. So how do we, those of us who are informed of the process, who are seeking knowledge regarding the process of voting, those issues that plague our communities, that all need to be informed of, what does that mobilization process look like? How do we come together collectively with a consistent process in order to educate them about what needs to change, what is taking place in the communities? How do we do that for those of us who are interested in being a part of that process or that movement? Either one, Dr. Dupree or Zack.
Well, one thing, Dr. Bartee, I think, well, I'll kick it off and I'll let Zack here. First of all, Dr. Bartee, you're part of that. You're doing that right now. You're educating people in our communities right now by just having us on and having this conversation about voting. The other thing is, because of the pandemic, the reason why the flags come down, the monuments have come down, and it's a good time to talk about it, is because of the pandemic. It's because people are at home, sheltered at home. They have nowhere else to go, nothing else to do except watch people like me and you and Zack on Zoom and Facebook and watch the news. And it has resonated. It's resonated in young people so much so that it engaged them to go out and do something. And because it engaged them, they did something. And I think that the ball has started rolling down the hill. I know people now that are having meetings with young people around the community now, and teaching them about the history, teaching them about voting, the process of voting, what they need to do, why it's significant. And that's going on all across the nation. I think and I believe that we're going to have an extraordinary turnout in this election in November. I just hope that when they turn out, that they don't just turn out and then leave the elected officials alone. That's one of the problems we have. We elect people and then we say, okay, do your job. Well, they're not going to do their job if you don't stay on them to do their job. You've got to stay connected with them. Which I'm bringing one other thing because it's off base. But we have a census coming up. If you want to change the dynamics of our communities, our cities and our counties, then please fill out your census. And I just want to throw that in because it is so important, because the things that we get from the federal government, if we don't fill out those census and our numbers drop population-wise, then our numbers and our funding drop as well. And I'm sorry, I kind of got off base on that, but it crossed my head. With my age, I have to bring it out when it comes across my head.
Oh, I think that's all part of it. The census, that lets you know how important voting is.
Exactly.
It's all part of it.
It is.
But like you're saying though, like I said before, our everyday conversations. This Saturday, I'm going to have a voter drive. I have bookmarks with me everywhere I go to say, verify your registration or update your information. Make sure you're a registered voter. Don't worry about the deadlines. If you miss the deadline, that means you're ready for the next election. We'll make sure you get in.
That's right.
So I think that's how the process starts year round. I hate to say it like this, but we campaigning year round about voter registration, about voting. Now, true enough, yes, I am the circuit clerk. I want people to vote for me. But when it's not my time on that ballot, I still want to promote voting. I still want to talk to people that you want the best person to represent you. And that's why voting is so important, because we want our future better. We want our children living better, the next generation.
I agree. And I think it happens by way of a collective effort. And I think now that people have a sense of what is really taking place in this country. And I always have made the statement that it helps to understand the broader spectrum of what is taking place in this country from a localized position. So I guarantee you, whatever is happening nationally is happening within your local communities. So with that being said, where do we go from here in a sense of, if we want to organize a plan to move forward, hold local officials accountable, how do we do that? Do we need to formalize a group, thereby informing the members within the community of those issues that plague us? For example, we mentioned earlier healthcare, fiscal stability, poor education systems, and then we devise what do we call it, laws or resolutions to present to our state representatives for them to address on the floor there in Jackson at the Capitol. How does that process look? And I know, Dr. Dupree, you mentioned about what we're doing tonight, but there is a group of people that we will not reach other than face-to-face connection. And that perhaps may be those marginalized group of people. Mr. Wallace or Dr. Dupree, either one.
Well, first of all, Dr. Bartee, people of faith, we've always been. And so, and I say this often, the true leaders of our communities, some like it, some don't like it. But the true leaders of our communities are our pastors. I'll continue to say that. I had 800 employees, and they would do what I wanted them to do on Monday through Friday, but they would do what a pastor says 24 hours, 7 days a week, because he's not only worried about them spiritually, but financially and all those other things. And so I think that we have to make sure that our pastors are engaged and on the same page like they were in the 60s and 70s. And I'm not talking about pastors, but I know that if we want to move our communities, we're going to have to involve us. We got to involve the faith community. So we involve them, and then involve what moves the decision. Pastors. Pastors represent a vast number of people. And so you move the pastors move the people move the ballot box, and it dominoes. It goes from one to the other. Now, I'm not putting that strictly on the pastor, but you just don't know what can be derived out of including the pastors in the process, educating the pastors. There's some pastors don't even know about the process. They can't tell you the date of the election. They can't tell you can vote after the ballot. They don't tell you what date. They don't know. So let's start off with educating the people that have that group of people already in front of them, that captured audience already in front of them. Let's try to do that. And then I guarantee you, if you can get them involved, and then there's some other community organizations that we need to get involved too. But I always believe that when they started the bus boycott in Montgomery, this young lady on the bus that got off the bus, nobody would help her. You know what she did? She ran to the church. When she ran to the church, guess who she ran to? Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. He grabbed all the other pastors together that would come along, and then we had almost the beginning of the civil rights movement that we had. It involved the churches, always will involve the churches. And I'm not putting the onus on them, but if you want to say where to start, let's start there, where there's a captured audience. And marginalized people, people of means, everybody seems to they'll be in that one congregate at one time. We could try that.
I like that. I like that. Mr. Wallace?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Dupree. I also say that you don't have to start a group or organization to contact the elected officials. I said you call them, leave a message, get them ideas, because I know I have a gentleman call me every year around election time. Zack, I need my ballot sent to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a familiar face, a familiar conversation.
Mm-hmm.
How you doing? What's going on with you? How your family? Just like when Dr. Bartee, when you reach out to me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think it starts like that. As an individual, if you're going to vote, you can call your people you're voting for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I agree. I like both of your comments. You actually kind of gave segue to the upcoming session on July the 28th, where we're going to be looking at the moral obligation of the church in regards to the politics. So Dr. Dupree, you hit the nail right on the head. And the guest speakers for that segment will be Pastor Advil McKenzie, as well as Pastor Wilson, Pastor Phil Wilson. And so we're going to talk about the engagement of the church. Historically, that's where we as people of color, or I would say my ancestors and forefathers, that's where they received information, whether it was during slavery time, where they may have met in a shack or somewhere, or just came together at a location. That's where information was divulged and informing them on what their next moves were. And you're right. During the civil rights movement, that's exactly where Dr. King gave instructions to the people of color within those communities as to what the next moves are. And there are a lot of people who have a sense or a belief that politics does not belong in church. But I'm a believer that as long as things are done decent and in order, we're not asking you to address that during a church service, but set aside designated time, which can be part of your educational department for those churches who have it, and have meet monthly or either quarterly sessions where you are engaging your people and informing them. So when it comes time to vote, they are informed prior to getting to the polls. Now back to you, Mr. Wallace.
Dr. Bartee.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Bartee.
Yes, sir.
Can I throw something in right now? Just, you know, I know the Constitution says that there's a separation of church and state.
Yes,
I understand that.
Uh-huh.
But for people of color, there is no separation.
Mm-hmm.
There is no separation.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you can't go to the state for help,
mm-hmm.
you go to the church.
Right.
That's where our help is.
Right.
And so there's no separation. There's a book that's out now called The Sword and the, what's the name of it now? The Sword and the Shield.
Okay.
It's about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, mm-hmm. about how opposite they were. Right. One was not done, and they met one time in their entire life, one time. Mm-hmm. And before Malcolm X died, he talked to Coretta Scott King, mm-hmm. and he said, look, let me tell you something. The reason I'm so adamant, the reason I'm so outward is because we have to have somebody who would listen to somebody. Mm-hmm. And if I'm out here on the fringes, then Martin would be where people would listen to him because he's a pastor, he's a minister, he's educated, they'll listen to him. So sometimes people have to play roles. And that's the role that the pastors play. People listen at pastors. They did it with Martin Luther King. That's why we got a holiday. That's why we got a monument in Washington, D.C. That's why we revere him so much. It's because people listen at pastors. People listen at because they're speaking from the heart. They're speaking to the heart. And so, yeah, there's a separation of state, and some people don't like it. But I'm going to tell you what, when you look at how far we've come as a community, you can't take the church out.
Yes,
now, I can give them historical background about why the church is so important and where we are and how we got here. And then I can share it. Then they can still talk to me about not wanting the church to be involved. Okay, well, you sit over how far you go with the church not involved, but I'm going over here with the church.
Right.
And then see how far we go.
Right. I love that. That's been our foundation. If we didn't, if we as people of color didn't have anything else, we definitely had God, and we could come together and usher in, as we say in the Baptist Church, the Spirit, and that's where our forefathers and ancestors were led. They were led by the Spirit, and I thank God for them. Even my grandparents, as Mr. Wallace stated earlier about the foundation of home, the foundation of family. Whatever they exhibited in front of you, that's what taught you how to be, or it taught you who to be. So it's very important that we extend those values to others who may not see those examples in the home, and definitely get them involved and engaged in this process. Okay.
Yeah.
One last comment, and then I was checking to see if I have any questions. I don't see any questions on my Facebook page as of yet, but we're at that time. Those of you who are watching on Facebook, if you have any questions or any comments, please go ahead and type them in there on the Facebook page, and I would like to definitely share or ask our guest panelists any questions that you have. Now, when we look at the pandemic, Mr. Wallace, would our voting processes be affected by that? Because some people, some other states are talking about the mail-in voting. How does that affect Mississippi?
Well, Zack, we're not going to have mail-in voting, no excuse voting. That's one of the things that I promoted, was no excuse mail-in voting. Now there's been, and Zack can talk about Bill 1521, there's been some amendments to some of that kind of, he can talk about that since he's a clerk, but we don't have the mail-in. And what that means is that our elected officials in Washington think it's more important for you to maybe get infected with COVID to be able to vote. And that's why they're doing that. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense that you will make people go and vote in person instead of giving them the opportunity. And those states who have given their people the opportunity to vote, guess what, like Iowa and something, guess what happened to the two that gave them the opportunity to vote? When they gave them the opportunity to vote by mail, they exponentially went up in the numbers who voted. But guess what happened after the numbers went up? The legislature voted in those two, in that one state, to change it. And you know why? Because Republicans are afraid that if people have mail-in the right to vote with no excuse, they'll lose.
Yes. So that's part of that systemic voter suppression that we kind of addressed earlier, which has been an ongoing thing since the civil rights movement of the Voting Act, where poll taxes were thrust upon African Americans, and literacy tests. Those types of things are still prevalent. They're just in a different shape and form in this day and time. So, Mr. Wallace, what can you add to that?
Yes, with this pandemic, I hate this going on, but we need to try to find some good in this. You have people sitting at home. We need to maybe use social media more and use this as voter education time. I really do think that we might have less people going out to the polls on election day to vote, which is November the 3rd. But I think we're going to have a lot of people who are going to take advantage of absentee voting. And it was some changes made with the House Bill 1521, whereas that you can come and vote by absentee. It's not so much early voting, but you voting before the election. And what they changed was that if you have been in contact with someone, or you you the primary caregiver of someone with the COVID-19, that you are able to cast your vote. And they have other reasons that if you're 65 older, if you have a temporary or permanent disability, or you think you're gonna be out of town on election day, that's why I hear a lot of that you can come and vote absentee. So we're gonna start early by promoting absentee voting, where we feel like it's much safer to come into the circuit clerk's office to cast your vote than going to the precinct on election day, which you don't know how the setup will be.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to kind of do an initiative to say, hey, on September the 21st, that absentee voting will be going on in the circuit clerk's office all across the state. You can come in and cast your vote. If you're not a registered voter, you can come in and register. You need to change your address. You can update your address at that time. So I think this pandemic will, like I said, we need to find ways to benefit from it. Like Dr. Dupree said, that a lot of people are staying at home right now.
Mm-hmm.
We need to give them something to talk about. And what they need to talk about, the importance of voting,
Okay.
voter education.
Right.
What is absentee voting?
That's right.
Okay. Okay.
Who is your circuit clerk?
Okay.
That's
Who
right.
is your circuit judge? Who is your justice
right.
court judge?
Exactly.
Those kind of things we need to talk about. There's no football on.
Mm-hmm.
There's no basketball. That's a good thing to talk about.
That's a good thing to talk about.
So why not talk
Right.
about church and politics, huh?
That's right.
right.
And believe it or
That's
not,
right.
we can always talk about the president. We have a lot of things to talk about the president.
We won't go there. We won't go there. But listen, on a note, you were talking about coming to the circuit clerk's office. You said September the 20th?
21st.
21st. Okay.
September 21st.
September.
That's 45 days before the election. Absentee voting starts 45 days before the election. It's October the 5th is the deadline for voter registration, which I tell people, hey, we want to start early.
Mm-hmm.
Campaigning about voter registration. If you miss the deadline, you'll be ready for next year.
Mm-hmm.
We have organizations, like you said before, where they are doing, they are going to high schools.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to youth meetings
Mm-hmm.
and making sure people are registered voters.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk to young folks, if one do it, all of them gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
We have some legislatures. They actually get things together with GPS and take a field trip down to the circuit clerk's office.
Okay. Okay.
So we're making moves. So I'm speaking larger numbers. Like I said, we have over 160,000 registered voters,
Mm-hmm.
and I hope we can get 160,000 registered voters. I know that's a lot of work on my staff, which I have a great staff, but that's part of work. That's part of work.
One of the things that he's tasked with on this 1521 is that when the polls used to close, where you could vote early at 12 o'clock on Saturday, now it stays open until 5 o'clock, which hopefully will increase that so Zack can get all those other people in. And then in this temporary physical disability category, it allows people to come in, which we didn't have before. So those are kind of things that we need to take advantage of, other than what they did in Kentucky, where they took 95% of the polling precincts and closed them. They went from 3,700 polling places to 200.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things. We have all these other countries that want what we have. Venezuela, Moscow, all these other places. They want what we have. They want this experiment called America that we have, which is by being a republic, not being a monarchy, but being a republic. And it's supported by the vote. And if we don't have a vote, then we're going to have a monarchy. We're going to have a man sitting up there in Washington, D.C., who's going to be a monarch, going to be a king.
And I think that
it may not be this one, but it'll be somebody else after him.
Yeah, I think that's the direction that they want it to go. And one other thing that this pandemic has done is, like you say, there are other people who want to come to America to experience the American dream. And one thing I will say, what this pandemic has done is expose the dark underbelly of issues and concerns that American citizens have experienced in this country for years. Yes, I do believe it's one of the greatest countries on this earth, but at the end of the day, there is some systemic darkness that has been underneath the shadows, but it's rising now. And so here again is that momentum I think that we need to take advantage of. And we're headed to the close. Now, one more thing, Mr. Wallace, in regards to those people who have not voted, they may have registered, but have not voted in a while. They are susceptible to possibly being purged off the voters roll. Can you just quickly address that situation for me? Because I know that there may be a lot of people who say, I've registered before, but they have not voted. I think it's in 2 consecutive federal elections.
Yes. Sometimes that don't always work if you don't vote in 2 federal elections. A lot of times the election commission will send out voter cards, notification cards, and it depends on if we get return mail. Everything is documented. Why they should be purged, why they are marked inactive, things like that. So that's why we wanted to campaign to tell people to verify your registration today. So if you have someone that talking about not being a registered voter, tell them to call the circuit clerk's office the same day. Go online, fill out an application and send it in just to make sure.
Okay, awesome. All right, Dr. Dupree, last word, and we'll go to our close. Did I sound like we were in church?
I think you said you have to say it 3 times in church before you actually get to the close. But let me tell you this, and the significance. This is we're supposed to be talking about the significance and the importance of the vote. Let me tell you how important the vote is. The vote is not only for the person who you elect and put in that office, but it's also for the people who they appoint and put in the other office. You don't vote for them, but you vote for the person who appoints them. And let me tell you what's coming up in the next 6 weeks. That is the opportunity for our kids to go back to school or not go back to school. And wherever you sit, wanting kids to go back to school or not wanting them to go back to school, let your elected officials know so they can let the people know who's going to make the decision whether your kids go back to school or not. If you're concerned about your kids catching the COVID, your teacher who's your wife or your husband or your cousin catching COVID, and bring it back home to those who have some underlying health condition, that is looming on us in 6 weeks. Somebody's got to make that decision. And don't sit back and just let people make that determination for you. Do something about it. Contact your elected officials. That's why it's most important to vote for people who are going to represent your best interest, not the interest of somebody else. Be selfish about it. Your best interest.
Awesome. Well, I tell you, this was a great night. It was a great start of many segments to come. I want to thank Mr. Zack Wallace, as well as Dr. Johnny Dupree for accepting the invitation. And Mr. Wallace, I can agree with you in regards to Dr. Dupree. He and I met while on the campaign trail, and it was myself along with my aunt. We were out campaigning, and we just got to talking, and he said that he was representing Jackson State University, and I said, well, I'm representing Alabama State University. And so my aunt said, well, I'm just gonna go and talk about the best school, and that's Alcorn State University. So when I met him, very personable gentleman, as well as you, Mr. Wallace, just down to earth people. And it's always a blessing and a privilege to be able to meet people such as you, because it's people like you that make differences and make, people like me who are inquiring about certain things that you all have been a part of. It makes it very easy. So again, I thank you. I thank you for accepting the invitation. And tonight we talked about the significance and importance of the vote. There was some vitally good information. I hope those of you who were listening via Facebook Live will carry this back to your family, friends, and communities, and even talk to your pastors at your churches. If you would like to send me a comment or two, I didn't see any questions or anything on my Facebook, but if you want to bring together some of the pastors and see how we can galvanize the people to vote and talk about important issues, I'm definitely willing to be a part of that process. And as I stated earlier, Dr. Dupree gave a segue to the next upcoming session on July the 28th, same time, same place, where we're going to talk about the moral obligation of the church in regards to mobilizing the vote. So again, I thank you so much for attending the conversation where engaged and informed minds meet, and you all have a blessed evening. Thank you.
All right.
Well, we want to thank you too. Zack, thank you for what you're doing. We really do appreciate it. Dr. Bartee, you stay the course. You're doing what's right, and we really do appreciate you putting out your time and effort to make it. We're going to try to join you on the 28th.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Y'all have a good evening.
All right.
All right.
All right.
God
Bye-bye.
bless you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.